This is Andreas Antonopoulos with Let's Talk Bitcoin. I'm sitting here with Amith Nirgunarthy, who's calling me live from Bangalore, India. And we're going to talk a bit about the latest developments with Bitcoin in India and the latest news with the regulators shutting down some of the exchanges. Amith, thank you for joining the show.
Happy to be here, Andreas.
So you've been in Bitcoin for quite a while, and I hear you know many of the participants in the Bitcoin community, especially in Bangalore. And I know from looking at local Bitcoins, that's probably the most active community in India at the moment. How'd you come across Bitcoin, and how'd you get to know the local community?
I actually moved to Bangalore with another job, and I was looking for friends on the weekend, and I came across a Bitcoin meetup group, and it was like match made in heaven. Ever since I met these guys, it was a cool group of people involved in Bitcoin, helping each other and teaching me about Bitcoin, and that's how I got involved.
And when was this? How long ago?
This was in May of 2013.
Oh, very good. And you've been involved with the local community. Now, India certainly hasn't made big splashes in the headlines until recently, but it seems like a natural place to adopt Bitcoin, the technology infrastructure, the level of education, the English language fluency among many in the population. All of those would indicate that it would be a place where Bitcoin would be a natural fit, especially with all of the outsourcing and offshoring. I have in the past paid contractors in India with Bitcoin. It took a while to explain, but certainly worked for me. So what do you think makes Bitcoin special for India, or India special for Bitcoin?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons that Bitcoin and India are like a match made in heaven. There is a high tech-heavy force here. Bangalore is known as the Silicon Valley of Asia. A lot of coding happens here, and there's a lot of tech-savvy, educated individuals who would very easily understand the Bitcoin concept. On top of that, Indians have a penchant for gold, and some people don't like to draw these comparisons, but ever since the English left in the 40s, the currency is not someplace that a lot of people would like to put a lot of their assets, so they go out of their way to buy gold, and they're used to using gold as a store of value. I don't see that much of a leap for people to have Bitcoin in their portfolio as well.
So if it's such a natural fit, how come China beat you to the headlines? I always thought that India would be the next explosive center of adoption. It seems like it hasn't quite caught on yet. Do you think you have an explanation for that? Do you have any insights?
I mean, I have an opinion just because I grew up in Hong Kong and I've spent a lot of time in India. I am an American, but I would say that Indians just generally are less risk takers and like to really either have full, clear guidance when they're doing things, or it has to be like a set. People have been doing it for centuries. So I think I can see why the Chinese have overtaken us in terms of volume. In India, I just don't think it is caught on yet. And especially recently, I mean, the press here has just been horrible towards Bitcoin. We had a couple good days after the big conference in Bangalore. Then two of our exchanges voluntarily shut down. One of them got raided last week. And now all the press that's coming out is, they're referring to people who deal with Bitcoin as being a gang. They are talking a lot about how it can be used for money laundering issues. And here in India, Hawala networks are huge. And nobody can say that, people are not laundering money through Hawala network, but Bitcoin is being targeted as, what are we going to do now?
So Hawala, for our audience who may not be familiar, is a person-to-person informal network of payment. Bitcoin is being associated with Hawala, not in a positive way. Have you seen any positive coverage from any Indian media, even not necessarily mainstream?
TechCrunch India did a positive article. Times of India and The Hindu did one on December 16th, before the raids, talking about, in a positive way, how the exchange was opening up in India, and Buttercoin is here trying to speak to the RBI, trying to get an actual regulated exchange hub. So there has been some positive news. But maybe it's because we're so involved in it and we just keep seeing all the articles. But I feel like the last week and a half has been a little bit depressing here. Every time I open up Reddit or Bitcoin Talk, any of the forums, it's like the end of the world for Bitcoin in India. And it's almost at a very crucial point. All of us who are involved in Bitcoin or Bitcoin businesses or trying to launch startups, we need to come out really strong and start talking about the positive things about Bitcoin, which we are doing. We formed or are in the process of forming an alliance. And there's talk about filing some sort of public interest litigation, which is called PIL here. So just to take our case to get a ruling on Bitcoin, because as we all know, India moves very slowly when it comes to decisions like this. And I'm not so sure we can wait. I'm not so sure it's good for the country if we wait, because if they push Bitcoin underground, the problem's only going to get worse, because this is a country where a good majority of its economy is run in the black. And it's just a known thing. Real estate is bought and purchased in cash. They have fronts. They don't pay their taxes. And it's just a known open secret here that I almost think that Bitcoin can solve a lot of problems for India, because as we've all seen with the Silk Road seizure, they got the coins and they traced where those coins are from. And here with the exchanges that shut down, people were giving their PAN card information. And for those of your listeners who are not familiar, a PAN card is sort of like our social security card here, where you need it to do any financial transaction. So people were giving their PAN card information. The exchanges were only operating from a bank-to-bank transfer. So that is a very strong control. If any regulatory authority wanted to see who's buying this Bitcoin or how much of this Bitcoin is being bought, they really have all the records there. It's a lot better than going to a street in New Delhi and speaking to your local Hawala dealer and handing him cash.
So last week was a challenge for Bitcoin in India. Can you tell us a bit about what happened? There was some regulatory rulings and then also some raids. What did it look like from your perspective on the ground?
The day none of us expected the Reserve Bank of India to come out with a statement so quickly after the conference. In fact, one of the Reserve Bank of India officials was there but refused to be identified and refused to, talk to the press that he was even attending the conference. Afterwards, when they put out their statement, all the papers picked it up and they didn't say it was illegal. And none of us, assumed it was illegal. Everyone got very scared because if it's not explicitly legal, then in India, the assumption is it's illegal and you need to have a license to operate. But nobody knows what licenses we need to get. Some exchanges have tried going through the exchange, like getting a foreign exchange license, and nothing seems to be working.
Yeah, that's certainly completely the opposite of the U.S. startup culture, where if it's not explicitly illegal, it's assumed to be legal, and we'll deal with the circumstances later. And I'm assuming the uncertainty is the hard part, because there's no clear path, and that opens the door for a lot of problems with corruption and bureaucracy and running around in circles trying to satisfy a whole load of different regulators who may have conflicting ideas of what's necessary.
And to be fair, India has very strong capital controls to protect its economy in whatever way that the Reserve Bank of India thinks is appropriate. And we understand. I used to be a banker for 7 years in New York, and I'm very familiar with anti-money laundering laws. And I understand where they're coming and what angle they're coming from. But I think that Bitcoin can actually help India more than it can hurt it. If once you start getting to the future of Bitcoin and we can start maybe even, it's a dream come true, but if we could track these government infrastructure projects in Bitcoin, it would be amazing. If we could track, there's a lot of schemes for the poor people in India. 700 million people here are living below the poverty line, and whatever ruling party is in power, they get their votes by promising a kg of rice for a family, or sending your kids to school for free, or promising you 100 days from work. And when you have these huge billion-dollar programs for the poor, a lot of corruption seeps in. If these programs were administered through like a master coin or a colored coin or some sort of, honest, open general ledger system, corruption could actually go down drastically. I just want it to happen.
Do you think there's an element perhaps of that understanding that money laundering is not really a threat that comes from the bottom up, but really in most places the money laundering is done by the banks for the banks and to strengthen corruption? Is that part of the reason perhaps behind these rulings, reflexive protection of established interests?
I think that that's what, a lot of us say, but to be honest, I don't think that they understand. I don't think the politicians really know just yet. I think this
is just a knee-jerk reaction, perhaps.
Yes, I don't think they're thinking so deep to how this is going to affect themselves sending money to Dubai yet. I just think this was a knee-jerk reaction. Who knows? They may see a benefit in Bitcoin for themselves, and then all of a sudden it gets fast-tracked. I personally believe this was a knee-jerk reaction. I'm staying positive. We keep moving forward with our Bitcoin businesses.
I think it's better to talk about the positive aspects. Certainly, there are three major areas where Bitcoin seems to be well positioned for India to take maximum advantage, at least from my external perspective. And if you could let me know if these make sense and give me your experience. First one's remittances from abroad, obviously people working in other countries who send money home. Then the entire offshoring, outsourcing, BPO business, which I certainly participated in, hiring service providers from India. And then finally, the tremendous opportunity for startups in India to build services with the tremendous software engineering skills and also the human resources to deliver high quality services to the Bitcoin network from anywhere in the world. Do you see those three and perhaps some others as strong possibilities for India?
The remittance market is something we talk about all the time. Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Bahrain, these Gulf Coast countries, the GCC countries, employ more Indians than actual citizens in those countries. And those Indians get paid a very good wage and they send their money back home to the villages in India. Now, that remittance market could really help Indians save more of their money if it was done through Bitcoin. So that is a huge market that, the government should be happy to support. Of course, there's the BPO outsourcing, but I would almost say not on the Infosys, Wipro, GE call center level. There's a lot of freelancers in India, tons of them who are on Odesk or developpreneur.com.
Yes, exactly. My personal use has been more focused on the Odesk and Elance freelancers, for whom a few small payments a week can be very severely affected by PayPal and Western Union fees.
You got it. There's small-time designers. There's a small-time content writers here. And, they need to be accepting Bitcoin. That would be amazing, but I'm just so scared that because of all this recent bad press, a lot of these freelancers are going to shy away from it.
And what about the startup scene in Bangalore and other tech centers in India? Are you beginning to see young entrepreneurs, dipping a toe into the Bitcoin ecosystem and trying to find ways to build services, not just perhaps exchanges, but more broadly other supporting services for Bitcoin?
Oh, yeah. I mean, at this conference, I ran into a lot of startups. A lot of people wanted to start BPO offices just to help other Bitcoin companies, because a lot of these startups in America and the West, in Europe and Russia, they're going to need to, manage customer support and service. Mt. Gox has customer support. So India is already really good at things like that. So there's a lot of people looking to become sort of like the Bitcoin BPO center, which is really, really good. There is exchanges is obviously a big thing because that's where the money is and that's where people can get the volume. But, I'm seeing other currencies being launched. There's a currency called Lakshmi Coin, which is aiming to be a domestic Indian digital coin. There is a lot of development work that's being done for foreign companies. So here in Bangalore, there is a gentleman named Benson Samuel, and he advises lots of foreign companies on doing development work and getting Bitcoin work coded. So there is a lot of interest, and just in general, the startup scene in Bangalore is really starting to take off, whether it's Bitcoin or not. We're starting to see shared working spaces. More people are not taking, high paying jobs and going to call centers. Now they're taking a chance and trying to join a startup. So that culture is slowly taking off here.
And certainly Bitcoin opens those startups immediately to a global audience and a global customer base, because usually in these types of endeavors, payments is one of the hardest things to do, especially in a country with currency controls.
You got it. And what scares me is, see, we missed the boat with the internet. That's something someone was telling me. I'm not 100% sure, so somebody fact check me. But in the 90s, when countries had to claim their IP addresses, India was late to the boat and it supposedly screwed them. I'm not sure what the full story is, or I don't want this country to miss the boat when it comes to Bitcoin, because we all know it's not going anywhere, and it will become legitimized. And 5 years, 6 years from now, we're going to look back and say, oh, remember when we had to fight so hard? Where no one had to fight for email or Skype this hard. I don't see why we have to fight so hard for Bitcoin.
Oh, we did have to fight for email and Skype so hard. Trust me, the telecom companies were very much against it. I remember a time when trying to do a long-distance modem call, you'd run into filters on international circuits that were cutting out the modem call on purpose because they didn't want you to bypass their own telecommunications infrastructure. The fight was there, it just wasn't as visible. Perhaps it was visible to the internet community, and we learned a lot from that, but nothing was rosy on the internet either. Nothing was rosy. Okay, I can agree with that. Well, one more point I want to bring up is, because Indians love gold so much, we don't make enough gold in this country. So what do? We have to sell our rupees and buy dollars and import the gold, and the government tax gold 10% because now we're selling rupees and it's hurting the currency. With Bitcoin, there's a huge opportunity to mine Bitcoins domestically in this country and to sell Bitcoins to people in rupees. And now there's no risk of people sending the Bitcoins out, and they're buying Bitcoins that are locally produced in rupees, which actually will strengthen the rupee. And who knows, if things get in place, big time miners, I see a lot of mining operations here in India. Big time miners can now export their Bitcoin. And what does India want to do? They want to export goods. They should really jump on this opportunity, because power is cheap. In some places, you can get 3 to 8 cents per kilowatt. Labor is cheap, and the technology is there the technology knowledge is there. And I think mining Bitcoins internally and exporting is good business for India. Yeah, that's a very good point. The other one you mentioned also, the customer service industry. One of the things that we really need more of, and we're suffering at the moment, is customer service, because all of the Bitcoin startups are facing exponential growth and are trying to bootstrap with personnel going from 10 people to 100 people to 1,000 people in a period of a year or two. And, it's really showing, because the customer service aspect suffers as a result of an inability to absorb all of the new adoption and demand. Certainly being able to outsource some of that and being able to very rapidly man up and get lots of personnel in India would be a boon to the Bitcoin community. So, Amith, we've had this little setback in terms of the regulators, but certainly this is more of a long game. Where do you see the future of Bitcoin in India? Are you hopeful? Do you see the community flourishing?
I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful. I see the community flourishing. I think it can help. This remittance market is the first thing that it can really do to have an economic impact on people who are not making that much money. And it can really help them save money. And, that 12% fee is enough for a family to eat for a month. You don't need that much money in this country. So everything that Western Union takes hurts them. And if there's a way to do it for 1% or less than 1%, let's say 50 basis points, that's a huge opportunity. That's a win-win for everybody.
Very good. So looking forward to hearing more from you on how things are developing in India, and hope to have you back on the show. And thank you so much.
If there's one thing I could add, I would just say, just to the Bitcoin community in general, keep an eye on what's happening to the owner of Buy Sell Bitcoin. His name is Mahan Gupta. There's rumors that he's under house arrest. He hasn't been able to use his phone. They've confiscated his Bitcoins. He's going to need a lot of support, encouragement, and help. And maybe if people could get on the forums, the Bitcoin India forum is very active on this topic, putting together a legal defense fund to help him if it's something that he needs. And this is something that we just want to make sure that he gets out okay, because he has a family and and he is, a pioneer in this country.
Absolutely, the Bitcoin community is global, and we absolutely need to stand up for each other. One day it could be me or you who are being harassed by law enforcement for no reason whatsoever other than running a legitimate exchange or some other business in Bitcoin, and we need to stand up for each other. That's a great point. Thank you so much, Amith Nirgunarthy, for joining us here, and hope to speak to you again soon.
EasyDNS is the Swiss Army knife for your domain names, helping meet their customers' individual needs since 1998. EasyDNS has been an outspoken critic of SOPA and CISPA. EasyDNS was an early supporter of Bitcoin, and now they are proud to sponsor this show. Do business with a company that shares your values. Get a 13% discount when you pay with Bitcoin. Go to bitcoin.easydns.com and be sure to use discount code LTB.